else could you say about like some of the lies that we trade in life
Right.
and in minds?
I feel like one of the things that we offer each other so much in the teams that we are is a transparency and a clarity. And when we don't do that, we sort of keep that as power over people. That's when the lies happen, right?
How does someone find clarity?
Make your clarity about the thing that drives the most success for your organization and just double down on those pieces. Go back to why your company exists and reinforce those. I do think that it's sometimes unfair to require a lot of leadership, a lot of anything from the people on our team without understanding their currency. So what is it that they want out of it? How is it that they're motivated?
Welcome back. On today's episode, Matt and I are interviewing Kristine Delano. After 2 decades in a career in high finance, Kristine is now a domestic suspense author. She has a new book coming out, The Lies We Trade. So we've talked a little bit about that today, the lessons she's learned about leadership throughout her career. Now she lives in Maine with her husband. She enjoys skiing and scuba diving. Another good episode today, and grateful for the things Kristine teaches us and shares with us.
Welcome to the Everyday Leader Podcast. Leadership is a choice. Join me, Matt, and my co-hosts Drew and Tate each episode as we break down how to lead powerfully in your family, team, and organization.
Welcome to another episode of the Everyday Leader Podcast. Matt and I are super excited to have Kristine Delano with us today. And Kristine's done a lot of awesome things and currently doing a lot of cool things. Excited to hear what she's learned about leadership along the way and some of her insights. So Kristine, welcome and thank you.
Absolutely. Great to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
Kristine, before we jump into who you are, we'd love to kind of start the conversation by, we like to ask our guests how they would define leadership. There's so many ways, and that can mean so many different things to different people. So we love to kind of just start with, hey, what does it mean to you when someone says the word leader or leadership?
I think leadership means to me influence. It's not a title. It's not a position that you're offered. This was not clear to me when I started out in the business. I really felt that to be a leader, I had to be recognized first for that leadership. I had to be titled for it. I had to be compensated for it. And it really was a learning process to me to understand that none of those externals created the leader. The leader needed to emerge from the character that you showed, the traits that you manifested, and the way that you influence the people around you.
I've got a question about one of the things you said there. I have sometimes felt like when I've had, and this is almost the opposite side of it, but where I've had someone on my team that I want to step into a leadership role, I've almost felt like I can't ask them to be a leader without compensating them. I don't know if I've ever even talked about that on the show or not, but you mentioned being compensated to be like you've got to be compensated to be a leader. I don't know if you have anything around that you could unpack or share a little more about.
I do, because I don't know that people always define compensation correctly. I feel like currency is really more of the way that I think about it. And I do think that it's sometimes unfair to require a lot of leadership, a lot of anything from the people on our team without understanding their currency. So what is it that they want out of it? How is it that they're motivated? So for some people, it is money. And for far fewer people than I think we understand it's money. There's a lot of other things that people want out of their jobs and their roles. Sometimes it's the ability to find a balance that really works for them. Sometimes it's the respect that they feel like maybe they didn't grow up with. They've never really understood its impact. So I feel like if you know the people around you and you know their currency or what it is that really motivates them, I think that's the way that you can, at least early on, help leaders on your teams emerge.
That's awesome. I love that. That's actually like really useful guidance as far as like considering what is someone's currency, because money's only one option. And yeah, I really believe that most people, it's actually not money, even though we kind of are just conditioned to think that's what it is.
Yeah.
And frankly, it's usually the easiest thing to throw at someone.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
I love
speaking to somebody right now. I love to mentor, especially women around me that are in, especially sort of the middle stage of their career. That's a little bit of my sweet spot. And there's a woman now who's like, every time she gets to the point where she's like, I think it's time that I resign, they just throw more money at her.
yeah,
And I've been sort of feeding that back to her. I'm like, that's not even your currency. Like, and yet she's sort of programmed herself for the idea that it keeps her happy. And it certainly, it does in terms of some bells and whistles they have for their family and their ability to do certain things. But I see her becoming more and more miserable because there's a misalignment with what it is that motivates her and what it is that their company is using to motivate her.
yeah. What in your experience? What's a useful way to extract what someone's currency is? And because I think a lot of times, if I think back to times I've asked someone that in different words, they don't know. In
Right.
your experience, how do you kind of uncover that with someone?
There's a few different ways. Certainly having conversations with them and watching their reaction to the way that they speak about things. What
Mm,
lights them up? What gets them so that you're like, okay, okay, like pushing them out of the office, like we need to move on. So I think that's one way. I've used a book system called the Strength Finder, which is a really, I think, useful tool to really understand what it is that people are good at, as opposed to basically 360 or other tools that are like, here's your weaknesses. This is what you need to get better at. This is really where people thrive within their jobs. And I think that's a good way as well. And then I also think the things that, are keeping them from always performing could be an indicator to what they're lacking and what they need. So I mentioned, work-life balance. I don't know that a lot of people, especially early on in their careers, understand how important that is for their sustainability of their career. And so if you start to see people falling off or not coming in on time or not getting things going, that may be where you can add the most value to their ability to thrive in their job.
That's awesome. Kristine, you've given me a new term. Matt and I like to say something over something else, like leadership over management, responsibility over accountability. I'm going to start saying currency over compensation.
yeah, that's
So
beautiful.
I love that.
That's super good.
I'm glad I can be
Kristine,
helpful.
could you just to give our listener a little background about yourself? I know you spent a couple decades in high finance, and you're now an author. Tell people a little bit about your journey, like what you're up to.
Right.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, I went to school for neuroscience, my undergraduate degree. I then went on and got a master's in engineering and really had this idea that I was all about complex systems. So my first job was actually for a Wall Street firm. And I was way too young, over promoted, and had teams in a few different companies at the same time doing very different things. And one of them was a pretty important Wall Street firm that I won't name. And uh, I thought things were going great. In my view, wow, we were getting exactly what they wanted. I was hitting every single bullet of what they were doing. And right before I had the presentation to the chief information officer of the company, which is really kind of the second in command to the CEO, I was brought into one of the offices of an executive office and said, this is why we're firing your team and you. And they proceeded to list some unprofessional things my team had done. And of course, I wasn't embedded with my team. I had a few that I was traveling around to. So I was completely unaware of what had happened. And I said, I apologized, but I had no authority to like figure out what the solution would be. I didn't know, was my company refund part of their money? Like, how would that work? And I was just spinning. But I basically said, do you want me to still go in and do the presentation? He's like, oh, yeah, you're going to go on and you're going to be accountable to the work that you did. So I went in and all the fear that I had kind of left me. And I was just like, you know what? I'm going to give them everything they have. This is probably the last time they'll meet me, last time they'll know me, and I'll just do it. And a 1 hour meeting turned into a 3 hour meeting where we mapped out the next 2 years of work for the company. the guy that fired me never told me again that I was fired. So we just sort of ignored it. I've known him my entire career now. We have never had the discussion of me being fired. And it set me up for learning so much about my leadership style, the mistakes that I had in fact made, the ability to own up to things, and also just that idea of like what imposter syndrome was going to do to me had I not been fired. I feel like I was going in quite tentative. I was going in quite thinking, do I have the voice to be able to do this? And he gave me this huge gift to just sort of release me from all of it. So I spent over 20 years working in Wall Street firms, directing very large divisions and product placements. Worked on the whole exchange traded fund product sort of revolution in the industry. And then I left just weeks before the pandemic hit. I retired and became an author, decided I really wanted to sort of share the stories in a really fun way of what I knew about the industry and how fun and thrilling it can be to work in a Wall Street firm or a high finance area.
That's awesome. I was starting to chuckle, and I just got to explain why, because I was thinking of the episode of Seinfeld where George quits and then shows up to work like it never happened. But I like your version more. That's awesome.
Well, during the presentation, I kept sort of glancing over at him because I kept thinking he was going to be like, all right, we're shutting this down. Like, I've already fired her. But he's just like participating like everybody else. And I'm like, are we on some strange planet? Did we have that conversation? So yeah, it was.
I love how you said that was a gift. Like that ultimately was a gift because it allowed you to show up more free. That's awesome.
It took me a long time to see it as a gift, but I do now.
Yeah, well, it's actually like a fascinating lesson in that like we could technically choose to be that free somehow, right? Without the external thing of thinking like, well, I'm fired, so I don't have anything to worry about, right? Like that's actually a really fascinating example of how do we create that without the external thing that frees us up, you know?
Absolutely.
So cool.
Absolutely.
Well, tell our listener a little more about the book you have coming out.
Sure. It's called The Lies We Trade, and it is about a ETF portfolio manager. So she is responsible for the construction of a very large fund, actually two of them. She's had tremendous success over the last couple of years. She's raised $1 billion in assets for her firm. They took a big gamble on her. And in the day that she's set to celebrate all this, to ring the bell at the New York Stock Exchange, she is forced to sign a restraining order against her second in command. And she's given some illicit data that compromise her and the firm. And the book basically follows her over a very short period of time as her marriage crumbles, her daughter, who's a teenager, gets into trouble at school, and all she can think is that everything is closing in on her and she has to discover who's the root of everything that's falling apart. And so it's a really fun sort of journey through what she does and who she can trust and who are all the players, characters that she meets along the way. And as I do with everything, I like to add a lot of the fun, thrilling elements, but there's also a lot of hope in the book as well, as she sort of leans into forgiveness and really follows kind of God's calling in her life.
That's awesome. I love the name too.
Yes, and I can't take any credit for that. I had a terrible name. And then when I sold the book, my publisher came up with The Lies We Trade. And I was like, as soon as I heard it, I was like, oh my gosh, that's the title.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So how did that transition happen? How did you go from leading teams and doing what you're doing to now I'm telling stories?
You know, I've always just been a voracious reader. I love fiction. I love storytelling. I feel like those are the images that we bring with us. And so when I was in my job, I would have to read hundreds of pages of prospectuses and reports and all of that. And I would give myself little treats. So I would read, 100 pages, and I could read 2 chapters in the thriller I was reading or whatever it was. And so I would constantly give myself these little rewards. And so when I left my job, I thought, oh, now I get to read a lot. And, I'd been invited to sit on a few boards. And so I thought, oh, this is just going to be such a fun life. I get to read and I get to do what I love to do. And then all of a sudden, I just had all these stories in my head and I couldn't sleep well. I was just telling my husband all these things. And he's like, well, why? What are you talking about? And so finally, he's like, you should write that down. And in the span of very short amount of time, I wrote my first novel, which was not good, but it sort of inspired me to this idea that I could finish a novel and I could write a novel. So I ended up writing 3 more before I felt like I was good enough to do this thing of being a published author. And so pretty quickly after that, I was able to land an agent and sign a book deal.
I'm curious, like maybe this is like kind of nitty gritty. Can you tell us, just like pull back the curtain a little bit into like what it's like to sell a book and like get a publisher? I mean, I think sometimes people
Sure.
are still like, how does someone just write a book, And I know there's a lot of ways now that didn't exist before. And what did that look like for you? And it may give someone, like, I know a lot of people who say like, I want to write a book or I'm going to write a book someday. And I think what you can share could help them step into that a little
Yes.
more.
Well, I don't know that I knew in the beginning what I was going to do with said book. I knew that I needed to write it. Like I knew that that was in me so strongly. I get a little embarrassed because I'm asked a lot about, when did I know I was going to be an author? And so many people are like, when I was in 2nd grade, I won this big contest. And I was like, I had no idea I wanted to be a writer. I knew that I loved stories. I loved telling them. I loved gathering them. I loved sharing them in like mentoring conversations and things like that. And it wasn't until I finished a novel that I sort of thought, oh, this is what I love to do. I feel like a lot of people would love to write, and I think it's okay not to know. Like, are you a wide audience? Is this for your family? Is this for you? Is this, a friends and kind of colleagues sharing experience? So for me, it was something that all of a sudden I wanted to do with excellence. Like I wanted something that spoke to the people that I worked with all the time. There's not a lot of Wall Street thrillers out there, which I find sort of fascinating because it's such a fascinating world. And there's a lot of medical and legal and all of that. But the world that we worked in was just fascinating. So I, for me, it was a day to day, every day, get better, keep writing, write the trash so that you can keep refining it to get it better. But the process itself is that in order to get a publishing deal, you need an agent, at least at the level that I wanted. I wanted one of the large publishers. I wanted to be advanced. I wanted to, have a partner in this. I wanted to make a career out of it. So I needed an agent. And in order to do that, you've got to finish your book, or for me, it was 3 of them. And then you write a query letter and you send those out personalized to agents and you say, this is why you should take me on. And I felt like I had a little bit of an upper hand with that because I have read and written so many proposals over the course of my career. So the idea of sort of selling myself on something and getting somebody interested in it, I felt like I at least understood the concept of it. And so I sent it out and I got a number of full requests and ended up signing with an agent one morning where she sent me an email and said, I hope you're having a good morning and I hope this makes it even better. And when I read that first line, I was like, oh, please don't let me down. And then after that, she puts together with my help a proposal on who I am and the book that I wrote. And she sent it out to a number of publishers and we got a bite right away with Tyndale. They said no to the book that we proposed and instead said, what other 2 books could you write? So that was a little bit nerve-wracking because to sell your debut on proposal is a little bit more upsetting because you don't know what it is that they didn't like about the first one. They kind of explained it, but they're like, just write something else. And so we came up with sort of a 2-sentence idea on the lies we trade, and they said, yes, that one. And so went through the process with them. They're an amazing publisher with incredibly talented editors. So I've been just thrilled to have their partnership.
It's awesome. What can you share about like some of the like I said, I'm so intrigued by the name of this because like I really believe that so many of us hold on to things that aren't true. Like we lie to ourselves a lot, or
Yes.
believe things that are lies, right? Not maliciously, just subconsciously almost, right? And so I'm curious, like, does that come across in the book? And what does that look like for you? Or what else could you say about like some of the lies that we trade in life
Right.
and in minds?
Yes. I think that's why the title is so brilliant, because it's the idea that she's trading lies with everyone she works with. The
Hmm.
idea of, I guess I'll back up to say that I feel like one of the things that we offer each other so much in the teams that we are is a transparency and a clarity. And when we don't do that, when we are sort of saving the idea of why we're motivated, what it is that we want from people, and we sort of keep that as power over people, that's when the lies happen, right? Because you're actually not sharing the most important piece of how they can be successful. And that's what she was dealing with all the time. There was just power imbalances all around her. And she was sort of trained up in that. So as she's working with somebody, or as she's forced to sign something, the things that she's saying versus what's going on in her head, there's an imbalance. There's a
Yeah.
lie intrinsic to those conversations. And then even when she's alone, or when she's talking to her poor teenager that's in crisis, the lies that they're telling each other about whether they have hope or they don't have hope, or whether she can come home even though she's offering it, she knows that she can't. She knows that like her job demands something of her that she's unwilling to break in this moment. And so I just feel like when you start sort of peeling apart the layers of the plot lines within the book, they're all sort of stacked in these lies, and it's sort of the clearing out of those that eventually, helps her to sort of discover what's behind it, but also discover a path back to the relationships that mean the most to her.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's so good. That's right. All of those paths start with telling yourself the truth or understanding that you've been lying to yourself, right?
Yes,
That's so good.
right. And I feel like you
Okay, so
can
how?
you can talk
Oh, go
about
ahead,
that
Chris.
sometimes with you can have the put it in bullet points and make it work. But what's so powerful about story is that it almost sticks with you a little bit better. It almost makes it that much more real when you actually read it and you see yourself in these
In it,
characters, and you'd be
yes.
like, oh my gosh, I remember saying that exact word, or I remember acting exactly like that. And you can see it sort of to its, maybe ridiculous end, how much damage it can cause.
Yeah.
How much of this story that you wrote came from experiences you or others you saw in your career have been through? I'm curious. Was it influenced quite a bit by that, or is it no? This is just a cool story that I came up with. Like, curious about that.
Yeah, it's definitely not a memoir. I think there is truth in the characterization of people, like how people think. I had people in mind when certain
Mhm.
scenes would happen or when certain things would happen. But my characters themselves always found themselves in different situations than I ever was in. But I would often think back to a story that someone told me, or a boardroom that I ended up having to present in at some point. And so I was able to take little details to make things quite authentic. But it was fun to start with a premise. So my premise when I first started the book was, what happens when someone is forced to end the career of someone they care about? what would make them do that? And at what lengths would they go to prevent that from happening? And what would someone have to do to convince them to do it? So that's never happened to me. So I think it's interesting to explore it in fiction because every scene then takes on the premise of that story start. And that's what makes it so fun. So nothing really can be lifted, but all the details are as authentic as I could make them.
That's awesome. Well, I think it's great. I mean, the world needs to experience these stories to help them see, like you said, like you can kind of see yourself inside the stories or see your experience inside the story. And so I think back to some of the most meaningful leadership development books that I've read were told in story form, not
Right.
in just like presentation form or in presenting information. Right. So that's awesome. I'm excited for you. That's great.
Well, and I think
What a cool message to convey through that.
and my goal is to get more really bright in um kind and considerate minds into the world of Wall Street. And so I'm hoping by reading this book, they get kind of like pictures of seeing themselves in sort of the more healthy aspects of it. So there are just, exciting ways in which people can participate in our industry of finance that isn't the Wolf of Wall Street, isn't sort of the craziness that maybe, we have pictures of. And so, I hope to write a lot more of these where people can kind of be drawn into an area that before has been rather opaque.
Well, and Kristine, aren't you part of, is it called Women in ETFs? Is that
Women
right?
in ETFs. Yep.
And
We're
isn't that
Mhm.
more women to that space?
Yes. So we started Women in ETFs about 12 years ago before it really became an incorporated organization. There was about 20 of us. I co-headed membership at the time. And the idea was, well, we'll try to get to 1,000 people. We're now like 14,000 people worldwide, 20% men. It's really about trying to drive diversity into an area of Wall Street that is notoriously um, underrepresented of anyone that any diversity at all. And so it's been really fun to see the impact that we've been able to have across, many areas of high finance. And, for me, it was, I would see myself as a female, the only one in a room, and I would try to fit in and I would try to like sort of devalue my differences. And Women in ETFs allowed me to say, hey, you know what? I'm okay the way I am. And in fact, I can bring some different perspectives and different ways of thinking about problems, thinking about ways that we interact with our clients and our customers. And so I think for me and for others, it's just been this amazing ability to network and to find the power of diversity in a place that has had very little.
You mentioned mentoring others, and what's some of your work been like outside of writing the book, and
Right.
either whether it's been on this board or helping others? And you talked a little bit about being a part of before we started recording, large changes in an organization, and maybe some lessons people can learn from that. Could you speak to some of those things for our listener?
Absolutely. Women in ETFs, we grew faster than our governance structure sort of could allow. And so I have been the chair of the NomGov Nominations and Governance Committee for the board for the last couple of years. And we knew we had to restructure. And so I wanted to share a little bit of what that looked like, only because I know a lot of leaders have to go through restructures, challenges that maybe there's a merger, there's an acquisition, there's a different way in which leadership has been either pulled apart or put together. And I really thought quite a bit about what were the leadership qualities that got people through that the best. And
Mm.
where did we see the best outcomes with the way people behaved? And I kind of broke it down into 4 steps. And the first one was presence. When you're going through sort of a large transition, the worst thing you can do is sort of hide away. The idea of like closing your office door and being like, you know what, I'm just going to wait until the chips fall where they may, and then I'll come out. You often find yourself with your little chip out on the sidewalk. So, find your presence within whatever chaos you're observing. And that doesn't mean you need to be loud, you need to be vocal, but you need to be in the room where things are happening. And then if you are the leader, trying to be as transparent as possible to your team. And you can say things like, you know, I'm I'm also nervous about this. Yes, this came as a surprise to me as well. Yeah, I understand why it is difficult sometimes to think about coming into work when we actually don't have a clear mandate. Just be transparent about your own thoughts. Don't try to stuff them down and then assume everyone's going to sort of rise to this occasion that you're, creating out of this. The third step for me is to then find your moment of clarity. So be as transparent as you want about how you're feeling, but find your moment of clarity for what we need to do. Okay, so yes, this has been really tough. It's been really tough on me. I haven't known really what to say about it. But what I do know is our customers still need from us blank. Or I do know that what the folks that are reporting to you are going to need to see is blank. And so have a few very clear points that you can share with people that really become sort of the rallying cry of this is what we're going to do during this time. And then the fourth one, which I think is often overlooked, I think sometimes people can get with this transparency and take that too far into sort of whining and griping, or they can try to create clarity and just keep saying the same things and everyone's still sort of bumbling around, not knowing what to do. So the fourth step for me is have a quick win. Have something that everyone has a piece of and a part of, and create something that people can win at. And then celebrate that win. And then if you still don't have clarity of what this major change has done to either the culture or the product lineup or the services your organization provides, create another quick win and keep not only celebrating, but announcing those wins to the people that are in position to lead more through this transition and tout the people that are doing well. So if I were to do those again, it's presence, transparency, clarity, and quick win. And to me, those are the things that can help people in any point of sort of the minor transitions we might have in our families all the way to, running large organizations.
Yeah. So I think I know how I would answer this, but I'm curious your thought on the clarity piece. How does someone find clarity? Like, seems like that's the of the steps. I guess for different steps might be difficult for different people, and it seems like clarity is often something that people really struggle with. Like, I'm trying to figure this out. I don't know what it should be. But yeah, I'm curious.
Right.
How would you recommend someone getting that clarity if they're in the midst of that?
Right. I think one of the places is looking at how does your company, how does your organization count success? So what is it that you do? So for example, if you are in sales, then you are about the customer. So make your clarity about the thing that drives the most success for your organization and just double down on those pieces. Go back to why your company exists and reinforce those. Sometimes we can get so separated from why it is that we do what we do because we're sort of in the weeds of getting these pieces done. So clarity allows us this moment to go back and say, okay, our day to day may be putting together these financial plans, but our clarity is all about having clients that are feeling secure about their retirement. So let's start with the clarity of where our end goal is and then create that quick win out of that moment of clarity. Like okay, so we're not sure where all these financial plans are going, but what we can do is assure that over these next 2 weeks, we're going to deliver every one of them either on time or early, and create that as your way to celebrate with your team. How would you
Yeah, I
answer it,
like
Drew?
that. And no, that's great. What I was going to say is what I found is often clarity comes when I just decide and act. Doesn't mean it's
Mm,
always the right decision. And often by just saying, "Hey, this is what we're doing," and maybe it's, "Hey, this is what we think is best."
right,
You move and you start to find out really quick and sometimes the clarity is this is the wrong choice.
right.
So,
And
which allows you to,
if you got some trusted people around you, then you've got the idea of being able to bring people in and say, let's find clarity together before we step out and talk to the 40 people that need to hear from us.
right.
So I do think that there's a lot of value in what you just said of, get people on the bus with you right away with like, okay, we don't know, but we're going to go with this direction. Get them there so that everyone else will follow.
Yeah, I think sometimes people think that clarity just comes from thinking about something forever. And while that
Right.
can happen, sometimes clarity can come from taking the time to be present, for example, and to create space and to think through something. Sometimes it comes from, hey, we've got to move, we've got to take a step forward. So,
Right. And
um,
knowing the level of clarity that your team needs at that moment, it's just something. It's just something that allows them to say, yes, that still exists in the world. Everything else feels like it's falling apart. People are getting laid off. Things are happening. But yes, we still know that our clients want from us this piece. And so let's just start with that bit of clarity.
yeah. Well, awesome, Kristine. As we kind of start wrapping up here, first off, where's the best place for our listener to connect with you and find more of what you're doing? Obviously, you have the book. Where can they find that? We'll link all of this in the show notes, but
Sure.
yeah, where can people connect and find you?
Awesome. Yeah. So my website, KristineDelano.com, spelled with a K. Is a great place. I'm on LinkedIn. I love to connect with people there. I'm on Instagram as well. My book is available everywhere right now on pre-order, so it's kind of fun. I didn't even know it until my publisher was like, "On your website, you need to link to all the places," and they sent me this long list of places that you could pre-order. And so it was fun. It was like a little Easter egg hunt. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, it's on Barnes and Noble. Oh my gosh, it's all these places." So yeah, The Lies We Trade is available all those places, and I really am excited to hear from people who read the book and let me know what they think, how they see lies in their own life, and how we can trade them away as opposed to accepting that wager.
Yeah. And then you also have a podcast too.
I do. We Talk Careers podcast. It's really for folks in looking to up level their leadership skills. We interview a lot of women, but a few men that are really inspiring to us, to talk about what it looks like to be a leader in finance and many other places as well.
Awesome.
And I think Drew, you're coming on as a guest
Yeah.
at some
Looking
point in the
forward to
future.
that. And I
Yeah,
was just thinking we'll talk more after, but I might have a person or two that would be good for your podcast. So,
excellent.
um,
I'd love it.
well, Kristine, before we wrap up, would love to ask, how do you want to be remembered by others?
I definitely want to be remembered as somebody who is always present in the moment and always with a level of compassion to do the right thing. Um, I know that I'm fraught with making mistakes. I'm fraught with imposter syndrome. All these things can be swirling around, but in moments, I always want to be the one that shows up and helps someone do the right thing.
Love that. That's awesome. Well, awesome. Kristine, thanks for joining us today. Thanks for some of the insights you gave. I love that idea of we started with currency over compensation. Then your 4 steps: presence, transparency, finding clarity, getting a quick win. Good, great advice, great nuggets. And so thank you for joining us today. And to our listener, today's the day.
Thanks for joining us on the Everyday Leader podcast. If you're ready to take your leadership journey even further, subscribe to our weekly newsletter for more insights and practical tips. And don't forget to connect with us on Instagram to stay a part of our growing community. Just follow the links in the show notes. If this episode impacted you, please help us spread the word and share the link with a friend from wherever you're listening.